Good morning, everyone, at the Global C.R.E.D conference. We are a group of educators from Washington State, and we're going to be sharing today how state agencies and world language associations can collaborate to support the seal of biliteracy. And we'll be telling you the story in Washington State. I'm Michelle Ancio Aoki, and I had the honor of being the state supervisor for world languages in Washington State for a period of time when we did some important background work that led to the seal of biliteracy, and I was working for the state when we passed the legislation.
Hello, I am Veronica Trapani, the current World Languages Program Supervisor, so kind of the next gen of this journey.
And I am Donna Lansbury, and I am president of Waffle, the Washington Association for Language Teaching, and I serve on the testing team with Michelle.
Great. We'll begin the journey.
First, we would like to do a land acknowledgement. So OSPI is located on the traditional lands of the coastal Salish people, specifically the Squaxin Island and the Nisqually tribes. So we just wanted to make sure that they are given their credit and due, and thanks for all our government-to-government relations with our tribes.
So you could say the journey in Washington State has been a journey over a number of years, and it began actually in the 1990s. I was actually at the first Heritage Language Planning Conference at the University of Washington. It was about 1997, and my daughter's Russian teacher, is a heritage language teacher in the community, had an opportunity to speak up to our state superintendent, Terry Bergeson, and she asked, why can't my students earn credits for Russian? And that really began that thinking of, why aren't we recognizing all the languages of students in our state? Why is it just limited to ones that they can study formally in schools? So here's the beginning of our journey.
When we look at the beginning of our journey, we're going to be referencing this timeline throughout our presentation today. So 1997 being the first part, and that's our initial inquiry, and simply, why can't my students earn credits for Russian?
So was developing a process for competency-based credit testing so that students could earn credits regardless of where they learned the language. And so it was about 10 years later, I guess actually 11, in 2008, when I came to work at the Office of Superintendent in Public Instruction in this glorious old Capitol building in Olympia, Washington, and became the World Languages Program Super. I was actually the first program supervisor that the state had had in many years. And part of the reason that we got the position is because of the advocacy of WAFLT, our Washington Association for Language Teaching.
So then we're looking at now, 2008 starts, and Michelle can talk a little bit more about the pilot grant from the Gates Foundation.
So the first step was setting up the World Language Advisory Group and working in partnership with the State Board of Education. And I think that's another slide a bit later. Can you go forward just a bit? Yeah, the World Language Advisory, great. Our first step with the State Board was to set up an advisory group with educators that were in K-12 as well as higher education, and just consider the logistics and the possibilities of offering world language credit for proficiency testing. And over a year we met, we did a lot of pilot testing with the standards-based measurement of proficiency, which was a fairly new assessment available now. And out of that process, the representative Kathy Taylor from the State Board of Education and I, representing OSPI, worked with our Washington State School Directors Association to develop a sample policy and procedure for awarding competency-based credits for world languages in 2010. And the State Board of Education endorsed that in July of 2010, so that was the real beginning.
There we go. The State Board of Ed convened a World Language Advisory Group, created the policy, and allowed us to continue on this journey. So while 1997 was the original, 2010 was really where it started.
What we realized among the World Language Association and our colleagues was that it's fine to have the policy and procedure, but if students didn't have anywhere to test, then it wouldn't happen. So we began working with some of our partner universities, University of Washington, Pacific Lutheran University, where our ACTFL president actually teaches as a professor of Spanish, Bridget Yaden, And we began holding days when we called them World Language Assessment Days to create that idea of movement, of student initiative, and so on. And we began offering primarily stamp testing to students who were interested in earning credits. And then the results would come back to OSPI, and we would produce certificates and letters to send to the students and the districts so that they would be able to add the credits to the students' transcripts. So this was the big launch in 2011. Here's some of our highlights of the first year of testing. We had a number of districts that began, and we, as you see, we got up to over 350 students, even in the first year of just pilot testing with the districts. So that was a pretty good start. And so that's one of the messages, is that you don't have to start huge. If you can just start, you start building the capability, and then the districts kind of encourage and support each other. What you need is someone who's a champion for it at the district to really make it happen. The assessments we started with, as I mentioned in our pilots, that with the State Board of Education, which was funded actually by a Gates Foundation grant on competency-based testing. They were interested in competency credits, and world languages was actually the first area that really stepped up to do it. We'd been using the standards-based measurement of proficiency from Avant Assessment, which had a number of languages, but certainly not all the languages we wanted to test. So in the summer of 2011, we actually tested out using the ACTFL assessments, the ones that we think of as like, these are heavy duty, these are world-class assessments for teachers, the oral proficiency interview or the new computer-based one, OPIC, and the writing proficiency test. We used them with our heritage language high school students at the University of Washington in our first Star Talk program with Russian heritage students. They did spectacularly. And so that's what gave us confidence that our high school students could use even adult grade proficiency assessments to be successful at earning credits. We also soon realized that there were going to be languages that even ACTFL didn't have perhaps a writing test. They have a lot of tests for oral proficiency, but not as many for writing. And so we collaborated at that time with the Center for Applied Second Language Studies, CASELS, to get some example items, the kinds of items that had been used when the stamp was developed, to offer a proctored writing test that the students could take. And then we partnered with Monique Roske, who was from M2 Language Consulting. I met her actually at ACTFL because we were both on the ACTFL Less Commonly Taught Languages Special Interest Group. So she had a real interest in contacting the professionals that could evaluate these languages. So that's how we started. Then we started getting languages like Oromo, for example, that didn't have an ACTFL OPI even. And so we developed a corresponding speaking test, and we used CASEL's product LinguaFolio Online as the platform for students to make the recordings. And that was kind of the beginning back in about 2011, 2012. In 2014, when we were transitioning in the world languages, when I left OSPI to go work in Seattle, OSPI asked Waffle to actually take this project on fully. And so that was kind of the beginning of calling these WAFLT custom tests. We continued working with Monique through 2020. She just retired in June. So it's been a marvelous partnership.
And you'll be able to see later on in the presentation that the WAFLT custom tests are actually one of the key ways our students are earning the seal of biliteracy. Okay, so we have our Roadmap World Language Credit Program.
Yes, then the Gates Foundation actually came back again with another opportunity. This was actually the Northwest Fund in the Gates Foundation that was supporting work of a special project called the Roadmap Project that involved 7 districts in South King County, including Seattle, where there were high numbers of students with socioeconomic challenges, a lot of English learners and recent immigrants, as well as quite a few Indigenous students. And so Veronica Gallardo from Seattle Public Schools, who was on the committee, submitted a grant to the Gates Foundation to fund this World Language Credit Program in 2012. And I became the project director for it at OSPI. So again, it was a super collaboration. And of course, our ongoing collaboration with WAFLT was key to developing those tests for the less commonly taught languages. Some of the things we did with the grant were create promotional materials. We actually worked with the state ombudsman's office to try to make things that would be really accessible to students and parents so they would understand the process, not too complicated. Students determine if you're eligible. Can you speak another language? Can you write in it too? Take the tests and then get the credits on your transcript. At the end of the grant, we also were able to produce a video that, even though it was made in 2014, is still really relevant. And we'll put the link to this video so that you can watch it when you'd like to in your own time. It has students and parents as well as administrators and educators from the area. So one of the provisions in the grant, being a large grant, substantial grant, it's about $500,000 from the Gates Foundation, was to partner with Education Northwest to actually produce a report about the impact of the program. I imagine this is probably one of the most substantial reports that's ever been done on this kind of testing and opportunity. And so we were really fortunate to have that chance to partner with Jason Greenberg Motomedi on producing the report. Here are some of the results. One of the things that stands out right away is that 44% of the students who were tested were earning 4 credits. You know, that's amazing. And that turned out to be a very important number when we thought about offering the seal of biliteracy. In other words, we could see that if we set the level at intermediate mid, where students could earn the 4 credits for competency-based credit testing, they would also qualify for our state seal. And even as it says there, 84% earned 3 or 4 credits. So that was really phenomenal. But the great thing is that students could also earn 1 credit, and that could be extremely helpful to a student. And the 2 credits is enough for you to apply to college. So all of those really show great signs of success. The fact that such a small number of students that did not qualify for credits at all just shows that our students are actually able to do way more with their language than we often realize, even with literacy. Here are some of the top languages that were tested during that time. There are more languages, but sometimes the numbers are very small, and so they're not able to report them in the same way. So you can see we were getting definitely to a lot of less commonly tested languages. They're not necessarily less common language, like Punjabi has a lot of speakers, but they're not languages we teach very often in our country. Now I'd like to have my partners here just share some of the conclusions from the report.
Starting off number 1, and these are pictures taken directly from the report. It's very easy to find, and I would totally recommend you, if you're interested in it, jumping in and reading it. Students recognized the personal, cultural, and social value of bilingualism. It makes it more than just, this is something I have to speak with my family, to recognizing really all of these types of values that they bring with them by being able to speak another language.
The next finding was that world language credits gave students choices and the chance to graduate on time. I just wanted to add, when I was teaching heritage students in Everett and we piloted the program for the first time, our Latino community had a jump in their graduation and academics by 20%. And after that, when the district saw that they completely funded, they began funding all the testing.
So it seems like definitely this is going to help certain populations that might have not had those opportunities before.
Mm.
And finally, that receiving credit made students confident about being bilingual. Even it doesn't have to be, I've had German students in the past where they didn't want to show that they spoke another language at home. And this really gives them the chance to be confident about it. They're earning credits. It brings both the value of these cultural values, but also the ones that we look at for college, and all of that kind of come together. So it really is a win-win. And so here's the ending of our roadmap. Okay, getting the Gates Foundation grant, supporting and testing training in language proficiency. And the training for the teachers is a big deal. This is something that be able to get those promotional materials and do all these things. You need to have people understand what you're going for and what you're looking for, and making sure that they understand and can help get that out to the families as well.
So here's the big moment in 2014, thanks to a tremendous amount of advocacy work, and a lot of it was done by One America. You can see one of the students with her One America shirt on standing next to Roxana Naruzi, who was our facilitator for our ELL work group and the group that got the grant from the Gates Foundation. They worked so closely with the legislature to get the seal of biliteracy passed in our state. And here is Governor Jay Inslee. He was just recently reelected, as a matter of fact, signing the legislation. We've got representatives from WABE and WAFLT and our legislators. It was really a happy day. So one of the things that was really key in the legislation that finally got approved, and I have to say it wasn't an easy road, because there were legislators, especially some of the folks in the House of Representatives, education committees and all, who were very concerned that the seal of biliteracy would be one more nice thing for the kids that already have everything. So if you think about advanced placement and international baccalaureate, who really are the kids that get those opportunities? But we were confident, because of the foundation we had built with the world language credit testing, that we knew we could reach the students that they were most concerned about. So a couple things to mention is that, first of all, the world language credit testing has specific language in that model, policy, and procedure that makes sure that a world language can be not only, I mean, it's English, obviously, but it's also American Sign Language, it's Native American languages, it's any languages, even if they don't have a written form. The idea is that we would provide an alternative method for assessing them in a more extensive way with their oral testing. In the legislation itself for the seal, you see right there that the superintendent's office was charged to provide a report. The legislature wanted to see that we were actually getting to the students who were in our English language services population, the students that have been qualified for English language learner services. We want to make sure we are reaching them and giving this opportunity to them. So that's a huge accountability and extremely important.
We also wanted to bring up, this is OSPI's current equity statement. So you can see that since 2015, this is still moving on. They're moving forward. Every time we have a new superintendent, currently the recently reelected Chris Reichdahl, that they're making sure to keep moving forward with this work. So it is not stagnant, and it's really important. And later on, when we talk about some of the next steps of what's going on here in Washington, you'll see that our work continues with making sure that we are providing equal opportunities and giving equity for our Native and heritage speakers. And so here now, this is not the end of our timeline. However, it's the end where this will set, where we'll stop here today on just the timeline, because just because the seal of biliteracy has been adopted doesn't mean it ends there, and the work must continue. So, however, since 2015, the seal has now been earned by thousands of students in dozens of languages. It was upwards of 70 languages just this year. So to talk about the current seal of biliteracy, and I want to point out that when we look at all of these different numbers here, we had a lot of students still basing it on STAMP, still a lot using AP, but as you'll notice that, so the written assignment and speaking and listening is the other way of saying our Waffle custom testing. And so we can see that this 347, that's still a really large number. All the way down to, we still had 8 students with our American Sign Language programs. So lots of different ways here. And it really is kind of a smorgasbord. Sometimes obviously what language you're taking or you speak might determine what test you can take, but also there's different types of testing opportunities for our students when they're assessing.
So just a note to everybody, the list of approved assessments is something that OSPI posts on the website, so districts all know that for these nationally approved competency-based credits, then they need to select one of the assessments that are available through there. But it's pretty much all of the kinds of assessments that are available.
So just looking at our top 5 languages tested, you'll see that Spanish was around 73% of all tests. So we're trying to reach, making sure with our native speakers here, and then students who are also learning it as a second language. But we also had Mandarin Chinese, Russian, French. Being on the Canadian border is something that is very understandable. Plus, it is also very highly taught around in America. And then even Vietnamese. So you can see that we're reaching out to our populations of heritage speakers.
And this is the data about the seal of biliteracy, not just students who were tested, right?
Yes, this is the seal of biliteracy.
So one thing to note is that we test really throughout high school. In fact, we even test as early as 8th grade, at the end of 8th grade, because we'd like to have students arrive in high school with some credits if they could. But the seal of biliteracy is not earned until students graduate from high school. So the number of actually students earning is much smaller than the number of students who actually qualified from the language proficiency point of view in the earlier years.
And this just showing some of the trends of the top 5 tested languages. So you'll see there was Spanish, obviously high, and you can kind of see some of the language trends themselves with some might go up or down. And as we'll talk about later, there might be some discrepancy with how things get reported and who reported and what districts we might have been missing. So this is not all.
It's a miracle that people even tested in 2020, to tell you the truth.
Yes, and that is why we want to bring up. So because we are focused on equity is one of our main focus with both the seal and competency testing. So when we look at the heritage speakers, about 17% of the seal that was earned, so not competency credits fully, but the seal of biliteracy, 70% were earned by heritage speakers. And so we have them broken down into some more subcategories where if they are an English language learner and are migrant students, and as Michelle can attest, and Donna probably too, it can be very difficult to, with our migrant students, because by nature they are migratory, it can be really hard to keep track sometimes what schools they're going to. Maybe one school offered it and now they're having a harder time at a new school. So, it can be widely ranging per year. So when we look at the bottom part here, looking at the difference between 2019 and 2020, did want to bring up there was a global pandemic, which made sometimes, especially with the Smarter Balance assessment being canceled, and that might have been one of the ways that our English language learners were going to be showing their proficiency in English even. So there was a drop, but and we also noticed that there were some major school districts that their data was not included, Seattle being one of them, and that is a major hole in our data. So as we're looking, yes, we continue to our non-English learners, our non-migrant students, there was a 5.5% actual increase, but we did see a decrease in our more vulnerable populations.
It's exciting to say that actually districts are already contacting us about testing, even though some of them are doing it remotely, or they're making all kinds of provisions to be able to safely bring students in to do this. So you can tell how much they really value it. The exciting thing that's happened is that because we took that risk of reaching out and say, okay, one way or the other, working with our partners at Castles and Avant Assessment, we're going to keep supporting these less commonly taught and tested languages. And now the major testing companies, Language Testing International with the Apple, look at all the languages they've added, Hindi and Thai and Russian and so on, Korean, and STAMP has also expanded greatly. And there's additional new tests that Avant has started offering, the WorldSpeak, and so that's been a huge boon to us. And it's available in a whole number of languages that our students need, and we're constantly knocking on their door, like, when can you add the next one? So that has made it a huge benefit to show the value of these languages and make sure that we have a way to test them that is valid and that we feel comfortable with. I think this one is really something, a place to stop and dwell for a moment, because Actually, one time I was presenting to the school board at the Seattle schools about the amazing success, and I had about 20 students ready to line up to be recognized for getting the state seal of biliteracy. And like, how did they get it? Well, they tested. And the room was filled with teachers with red t-shirts objecting to state testing. And so it's like, not all testing is necessarily bad. And so the things that make our testing for world language credits different is that it's really a low stakes process, and we try to present it to the students that way. If you test it today and those weren't the results that you were expecting, you can retest. You know, you might wait a few months and come back. If you're strong, usually because you'll get data about your speaking separately from your writing or reading, you know which areas you're strong in already. So then if there's an area you're not as strong on the test, well, let's work on that. We're also very fortunate that a lot of the tests we give, like the STAMP test and WorldSpeak, are not timed, so that isn't a limitation for students either. We've also recently in Seattle started offering more opportunities for English learner qualified students to test in the end of 8th grade to see if they can earn some credits to take into high school. And that's actually been really interesting because it gives a lot of insight into where they are already quite strong in their home language, which can also predict how successful they'll be academically when they continue on. And for those that were not quite strong enough in their home language, that says, wow, we need to give that student more support in that, encouraging them to develop literacy in their home language while they're also working on English. And finally, in this point here, I just want to say that our state seal, we picked the level of intermediate mid. In part, we were modeling after California, which, because we were about the 4th state to adopt the state seal of biliteracy. Also, intermediate mid was the level for 4 credits in our state, and that's the highest that we were going with the competency-based credits. And it was the highest level that we felt confident about testing for these less commonly taught and tested languages. So that was a good level for our state. We wanted it to be something that was achievable, even in a state where we don't exactly have stellar world language programs. We have a lot of schools that barely offer 2 years, maybe 3 years, maybe 1 language. So we had to have some successes. So we loved having a level where we could see success. But we also had a lot of students in dual language immersion programs and heritage language speakers who could get to a higher level, like advanced level proficiency. And so when the Global Seal of Biliteracy was introduced, we were really excited about the opportunity to have students earn that at the working fluency level. So those are just some of the things that I feel have been, strong and powerful about our process. How about you guys? Any comments?
I was just going to add that one exciting thing about the Global Seal of Biliteracy, my granddaughter's helping me here, is that with the Global Seal, the students can earn that before their senior year. The State Seal of Biliteracy is only after they've passed the English and at least 4 credits for the Seal of or the 4 credits for the State Seal. So the Global Seal, I've had an 8th grader. Michelle and I are working together with that to let anyone, whether they're in public school or private school, even homeschool, they can take the test and still get the Global Seal.
And I just wanted to bring about, and Michelle had mentioned our dual language education programs, that these are students that might have been taking the language, starting from kindergarten all the way through 8th grade. And the way the grants are awarded here in Washington, they are expected, the school districts, to continue through high school. And so this allows students to, at the end of 8th grade, if there is not an opportunity or they're looking for, they can test at the end of 8th grade to at least get those competency credits, and they can earn, then they can retest later. So we want to make sure we're getting the students at their best when we can get them. So there really are, the earlier opportunities are really critical in maintaining and helping our dual language education programs as well.
So here's our Waffle testing team. And Donna, why don't you just say a little bit about how, as a bunch of kind of individuals, we were able to connect together and work together as a team to keep this work going forward.
The WAFLT board, there's about 20 of us, and then there have been 3 to 4 of us at a time on the Waffle testing team. And we're all volunteers. Most are teaching school full-time or on a million boards like Michelle. And even though both of us retired recently, we still continue to volunteer, and I've been called back into work to help with student teachers. And so we would love to see as the more support we can get through OSPI, whatever organizations, because it is volunteer work, but we're very passionate about this. And our biggest goal is that we never say no to any language. We've gotten requests for some native languages, which I'm very passionate about too, making sure that any of the tribes who want to get this kind of recognition for their students at our tribal schools, and that they're able to get that kind of recognition. We're here to support any language. We're looking for some native languages from the Mayan of Guatemala. And so our wonderful Monique retired. And so we need another person, a company to step in that will just search for these unique languages to find people who can evaluate. So the biggest thing is we never say no. Any language in the world, we will find a way. And it may take months, but we will find a way to get them that testing so they can get credits.
Donna, would you like to talk about some of the awards and the recognition?
Yes, so I love this. So having gone from teaching in the classroom and working with the heritage classes and seeing the excitement of students taking the test and recognitions and awards nights with just all the Native families and families, the heritage families and their parents, and how proud they are. Often this might be the only recognition they would get. And then at graduation, their senior year, all those who had four credits and passed their English language receive a medallion. And they get to wear it to graduation, just like an honor cord. So this year we had students just take pictures of themselves and send it in, and so that we could honor them for the work they do. To be bilingual at graduating from high school, bilingual is quite an accomplishment. And anyone who wants to order the medallions, they can just email waffle testing at waffle.net. I check it every day. And I've got the medallions here and we can send them out, or you can individually order it, but we buy bulk. And so we can get them cheaper for you.
Yeah, we can, since I'm also chair of the advocacy committee in WAFLT, we just consider this part of our advocacy for languages. We advocate best for the languages we teach in school when we advocate for all the languages of our students, we believe. So that's part of why we put this extra effort to make this available. So here are some implications for language teaching, learning, and research, because the fact is that this is not really about testing. It's about having people develop further proficiency in all kinds of languages. That develops greater capacity in our world, in our country, certainly. That's important for the military. It's important for diplomacy. It's important for trade. It's important for pandemics. It's important for everything that matters to us, more so right now than probably ever before that we've been aware. And so these are some of the challenges that we need to address. For example, if students can retest, what support can we offer so that they could increase their literacy? So we do have that case where students come in. To tell you the truth, sometimes we run into this more at the college level, where at the University of Washington, students are able to use our tests in order to satisfy the College of Arts and Sciences exit requirement. But you've got students coming in with languages like Tigrinya, and they may be advanced low in their speaking, and they can't even get beyond novice high in writing. And it's because they left it behind so long ago. And so how do we do things to encourage and help students that have strong language speaking skills to develop literacy more? So do you want to say something about self-directed language learners, Veronica? I imagine that's something close to your heart.
Sorry?
About the self-directed language learners, you know that of course it's important what we do in school and what our teachers do, but we really want students to look into their communities also for tapping into resources and developing languages further, right?
Yes, and just had a meeting the other day with a community where they have a large Indian and Indian American population, and so they're already taking classes outside in their community, and so are looking to start a Sanskrit program. So that way, there were some issues where sometimes dialects. India is a very large country with hundreds of different dialects, and so being able to make sure that they're all kind of learning something that can be across, but they already have the community support. And so making sure this now is also, besides getting teaching credentials, but allowing community members as well to come in, and students start seeing, as we talked about before, the value and the social cultural value of their language as well. So this is a really important aspect of the Seal of Biliteracy and of language teaching, learning, all language acquisition in general, is centering it within a community, which is something that has also been very important to our tribes. And so for our Indigenous students, making sure that the language is centered and in sovereignty.
You know, and I just want to add, in Washington, we have a lot of Saturday schools. There's the Korean school, the Russian, Vietnamese, Ukrainian, several languages, and these students go 1 to 4 times a month to these schools, and they're a wonderful opportunity. And so those students can take the global SEAL if they're not in public school, if they're in any other situation.
Right. The other thing is that the complaint we had heard over the years is that kids would go to those schools, but they didn't feel relevant. You know, often they were taught, the teachers were native speakers of the language, but they might be engineers or some other profession, and they just are trying to teach the language but didn't have much experience in it. So for the past 10 years at the University of Washington, we've been offering a lot of programs for heritage, for teachers of heritage language students for a variety of languages, so that they can learn the best research nowadays about how to be effective working with heritage language learners. And we also need to have parents better understand that their children are not going to be the same as native speakers that were born and lived in a monolingual country where their home language was spoken. They're going to be bilingual and multilingual, and that is fabulous, but it's different. So they also need to have a lot of help to get to know that and how to support their students so that the students they're not afraid to use their language. And that's what we saw going back to that study with Education Northwest, was that students reported going to their families to ask them about the language, to help them because they wanted to be able to earn the credits. And that's the way we'd like it to be.
So if you are looking for more information on either World Language Competency credits, how Washington is currently facilitating the Seal of Biliteracy, or more about some of these Waffle tests, the Waffle custom tests, these are our links, and they will provide you with more information. And you can really, if you search OSPI or WAFLT, they'll get you to OSPI World Languages. Will also bring you to these sites, and we'll link them. Just a couple of our references. Definitely really important that these presentations cannot be done without all the research that's being done outside of our organizations. And just wanted to also show OSPI's, their vision, mission, and values. And you'll notice that the top value right now, ensuring equity. And these things are constantly being changed and moved forward and progressing. We now have at OSPI, we have a equity and diversity and inclusion special interest groups that are working with almost all the members of our different divisions.
Thanks, you guys, for joining us today. And thank you, Veronica and Donna, for letting me be part of this. It's great to continue this wonderful collaboration we've had for so many years.
Agreed. Thank you, Michelle and Donna, for joining.